This is a how to set your bed blade for the 4090 wood chipper. So before we start removing the bed blade, there's a couple tools that we can use that make the job a lot easier. First off, you see this is what the bed blade actually looks like. It's 4140 heat treat, so it's a good hard bed blade. And we can utilize all four sides. So once one side's rounded or worn, it can get flipped over to any of the other three sides. And people ask, well, how long does this last? You know, it really depends on what you're chipping, green or dead branches, or if you're putting some, you know, if you get the accidental nail that goes through the chipper. But typically it's every 3 or 4 times you change the blade. This should be checked, and it doesn't take much to change the bed blade or readjust it. The tighter the bed blade, the more efficient the chipper will be. If the bed blade is worn, it's going to reduce blade life, and it's also going to change the chip size and be a less efficient chipping, and it's going to take more power from the engine. From there, we're going to want a torque wrench to set the torque spec on it, a 5/8 to use to remove the bolts. We will need a swivel attachment to get to the far side of the bed blade, of the one bolt, an extension, a flashlight to get into the bed blade so we can see what the actual gap is on the bed blade. And I use a hammer and a screwdriver just to tap the bed blade down to get it exactly where I want it before I tighten it the final time and set it to torque spec. So the bed blade gap is very important on these wood chippers. For this chipper here, the spec is between a 16th or a 62 thousandths on the large side of the gap to 30 thousandths on the small side of the gap. Now, to visualize that, which is difficult sometimes, 10 pieces of regular copy paper are, you know, just over 30 thousandths, and 20 pieces would be a 16th or a 62 thou. Now, if the gap is larger than 62 thou or a 16th, you're going to run the risk of losing efficiency on that chipper. It's not going to have a good cut, and if you go under 30 thousandths, which you could, but you're going to run the risk of that blade, you know, if you just get too close to the blade, the actual cutting blade hitting the bed blade, which is going to damage the blade. It's not good for the bed blade, and in certain cases it could cause some serious damage and or personal injury. So make sure you fall from that 30 thou to 60 thou spec on that bed blade gap. So first things first, we're going to remove the infeed chute. That way we can get to the bed blade and we can start working on it. So this chipper here already has a fresh blade on it. And so after we get the infeed chute removed, we're going to go ahead and we're just going to loosen the 4 bed blade bolts. And then for the final and the 4th bolt, that's when you'll need to utilize the swivel. Now the bolts are loosened. We're going to use some air pressure just to clean the debris out of there. And once the debris is removed, we can take the bed blade and we can move it all the way up. Now once you move it, you might see some more debris, so take your blower and remove the rest. So now that bed blade is moved all the way up, or we can hold it all the way up in the stroke, and while it's all the way up in the stroke, we're going to re-tighten the bolts or re-snug the bolts in that position. And while I'm holding the bed blade up, I'm just going to snug these lightly. We're not going to tighten them, but we just want the lock washers to re-engage, and just put some gentle pressure on it. That way it just holds it up in position. And we can just do the far bolt and the 3rd bolt, so now it's being held up in position, and from here we're going to set our bed blade gap. So now we can go ahead and set our bed blade gap. Now this machine here is a single blade rotor, so we only have to worry about the one blade and the gap on that blade. But if you have a 2-blade rotor or a 2-blade machine, you want to always check the highest blade. Now in certain cases the blades are always going to be perfectly the same height, but over time things move a little bit and you might have one blade that is just slightly higher than the other blade. And so you always want to set your bed blade gap off the highest blade. So as we're checking gap, if it was a 2-blade rotor, I would be switching from one blade to the next to find the highest blade, and from there I would set the gap based on the highest blade. Now with a single blade rotor, we just have the one blade to worry about, so we don't have to check for a second blade. So in this case, we can see that with the bed blade in the up position, we have what it looks to be like, I would say, about a 3/16 gap. And so we have to drop that bed blade down to get it within, you know, the 30 thou to 60 thou gap requirement for this machine. The easiest way we found to do it is by simply just taking a small flashlight, placing it on the rotor, taking a screwdriver and just lightly tapping the bed blade down. And that's why we just gently snugged the bed blade bolts in the back so we could still move it around. But this, so now we're down to probably 1/8 of an inch. We're just gonna keep lightly, just tap it until we're happy with that gap. So from here, we've got our gap set correctly. We're gonna go around to the back and we're just going to snug all 4. We'll double check our gap to make sure things haven't moved, and then we can set it to our torque spec. So we'll just come in here, and we're just gonna give them a little bit more. Okay, and now that we have a good snug on all 4 bolts, we'll go ahead and we'll double check our gap to make sure nothing has moved. And we're just gonna come in and double check things. And that looks real good right there. The whole way along, it's nice and even. And so rather than opening the owner's manual, I could just go to the side of the machine here, and it's got all the torques engraved on a piece of aluminum. I'm looking for the bed blade bolt ×4. The torque is 55 foot-pounds. Real simple. All right, so 55 foot-pounds. I'm just gonna start from the inside out. Okay, and then it's always very important to check your torque. So in this case, I'm gonna go forward, or I'm just gonna reverse my pattern just to double check. And there we go. All right, and after we've met our torque spec and that's being double checked, let's go ahead, triple check our blade just to make sure that we're happy with the gap. And look at that, beautiful, nothing's moved. Ready to roll. All right, so that's it to a bed blade setting / change on the 4090 wood chipper. Of course, if you have any questions, you can give us a call anytime or refer to the owner's manual. And for more 4090 wood chipper maintenance videos, check out our YouTube channel.